I'm going to begin with the end in mind, as Steve Covey advises us to do, and share with you an experience that happened in 1816, 4 years before Joseph Smith received his first vision. A man by the name of Solomon Chaimberlin lived about 30 miles east of Palmyra. At that time, he was 29 years old, married, had 3 little children, and one night he went to bed. In fact, he went to bed every night, I think, except when he had to irrigate. But he went to bed and had a dream. And in this dream, he was told by a man that, how are you doing? Good. We won't interrupt or anything, but is there any particular girl you want to have sit next to you while we're... Oh, okay. Are there any volunteers? Is there any one of you young ladies that would like to come up? If you change your mind, just walk up and I won't mention you. Because he's quite handsome, as you know. But at any rate, Solomon Chaimberlin went to sleep and had a dream, and in this dream a man came to him and told him that the fullness of the gospel was going to be restored in the near future, and that along with the regular Bible there was going to be a gold Bible involved in the restoration. And he was so impressed, he awakened, recorded his dream, and created a little pamphlet and had them printed off on one of those old presses, and spent the next 13 years handing out brochures or pamphlets of his dream about what was going to happen. Well, in 1830, just a few weeks before the church was restored, he was now 41 years old, and he needed to go on a 700-mile trip up into Canada, and so the Erie Canal had been finished in 1820, actually, that 345 miles, emptying into Lake Erie down from New York City. And so he got on a barge and headed northwest up to the Erie Canal into Canada, and he said that when it docked in Palmyra, the very first dock, he said the sweet genie, that's what he called the Holy Ghost, but he said the sweet genie invited him to get off the barge, and so he did. And then he said he was told to go south, and so he walked south about 3 miles, and then he was told which house to go to spend the night. And so he did, and they said, sure, come on in, and so, or whatever words they used. And so he spent the night, and he was just having breakfast the next morning, and the lady of the house said, have you ever heard of Joe Smith and the Gold Bible? And years later, after electricity had been invented, he said when he heard the words Gold Bible, they shot like lightning, like electricity, down from his head all the way down to the ends of his toes. And he was just deeply moved, and he said, where is this Joe Smith? And she said, well, he lives over in that house across the field. He couldn't wait to get over there fast enough. And he got over there, and the screen door was closed, but the door was ajar, and he saw a man pacing back and forth. In fact, there were several men in the home. We don't know exactly how many, but pacing back and forth was Joseph's older brother Hiram, who had just seen the golden plates. And also there was Samuel, who had seen the golden plates, and their dad, who had seen the golden plates, and Peter and Christian and Jacob and John Whitmer, who had seen the plates, and Hiram Page, their brother-in-law, and Oliver Cowdery, their other brother-in-law, who had both seen the golden plates, and David Whitmer, another brother, who had also seen the golden plates. We suspect that there were all 11 witnesses who were there in the home, and Hiram was pacing back and forth, and he welcomed this Solomon Chaimberlin in, and Solomon handed him his brochure, and he said, are you God-fearing people? And Hiram said, yes, we are. And he said, well, then read this pamphlet. So Hiram sat down and began to read and began to cry, because his brother Joseph was up at the press trying to crank out the first 4 giant pages, 16 pages each. They're called signatures to the Book of Mormon. Well, later that day, Joseph arrived back home, and Solomon spent 2 days with that group of brethren. Can you imagine? I suspect that they were there polishing off their witness statements that would be going in the front of this brand new book that was just being typeset. Well, when Solomon was about to leave, Joseph took him up, and by now the 4 giant sheets had dried, and so he took them down off the clothesline or the paper line and folded them up, and he handed him the first 64 pages of the Book of Mormon that wasn't even a book, and he said, "You go to Canada and you bear witness that this book is about to come forth and that it's true." And Solomon did. And he arrived back in New York right after the church was restored, and Joseph went out into Lake Seneca, another one of the Finger Lakes, and baptized Solomon and his wife. And later they followed the saints all the way to Kirtland, and then all the way down to Illinois or Missouri, and then all the way back up to Illinois. And then they followed them all the way to Salt Lake. And then Brigham Young said, "Don't stay here, Solomon. You take your family and go down to St. George and settle down there." And so they settled down in Washington, just right outside of St. George. And I believe there are 2 of the 3 now unmarked, washed away sandstone gravestones. Graves there in the Pioneer Cemetery in Washington. But I think of Solomon Chaimberlin and his commitment because of one experience that he had. Because he knew that the gospel of Jesus Christ and that gold Bible had been restored to the earth. Now that's where we're going